Now we're going to talk about sort of the functional day-to-day classroom work. And we're going to start off with the idea of agreements and expectations. So before we kind of get into this, we want to just kind of popcorn out and have a little discussion about what is the difference? Is there a difference between rules and agreements? So let's give folks a little minute to think about it. So here are some images from classrooms. Obviously, these are rules. Okay. What do we notice about this sort of set of rules? Here's another image of rules in a classroom. Again, take a quick moment to look at this and sort of reactions here. I mean, I think one thing that I will appreciate is that this is, I think that the teacher is trying to, is making an attempt to like generate it from the children. I do feel like this is an authentic, idea that here, tell me what you think the rules are. And again, even if you said to children, tell me what you think the rules of the classroom should be, clearly if they're answering like this, they're sort of still seeing rules as the things that will control us, the things that are, again, negative, sort of, I like negative enforcer tone, right? So it doesn't leave a lot of room to make mistakes, or again, that idea of like, we just set up this wonderful emotional climate to be safe, to have a range of emotions, a range of behaviors. And then if you now set up, here are what the rules, this is what stuff is really, this is what's really going to go down in the classroom. Do we kind of see how this runs really counter to everything we just sort of set up with our soft pillows, our, nice lighting, our I like yous? This sort of feels like, this feels a little off. So here's some ideas from some other, this is actually a great idea. Yeah. So again, let's just think about kind of the contrast of what we saw with the other kind of rules construct. This idea that, again, these are pictures from the classroom, very concrete ideas. So I will use my inside voice or I will use my listening ears today. That's, a teacher showing very clearly what listening ears look like. Oh, I love it. It's the whole body. Listening ears, it's like you're bending forward to listen to somebody, using your ears. Gentle touches today, right? These are pictures of actual kids doing, it's tactile. Teachers should guide, but allow them to have input. Absolutely, take ownership. And so rather, in contrast to the last sets, where it was like, you will, you must, this is I will. This gives kids a lot more agency, a lot more responsibility, a lot more, again, self-regulation, executive functioning, because it's really sort of saying, I will do this. This is much more empowering. So for me, the difference between rules and agreements and expectations for children is that rules sort of presume that children need to be controlled, or that they will be out of control any minute. And so unless we set up some really clear rules, they're going to go bananas. An expectation or an agreement sort of presumes that actually children are very altruistic, that they want to do good. They, that when they make mistakes, that they're not doing it out of a sense of malice, or that they have those motivations. I mean, obviously there are children who have some emotional dysregulation, but for the most part, when we talk about making agreements with children, again, it really does have this idea that these are human beings that have good intentions and that may not have necessarily the life experiences yet to be in a classroom setting, but that an agreement sort of sets the tone that we're going to learn these together. So we're going to show you a few ways, or the three sort of agreements that typically a lot of our classrooms are organized around. We are safe. Obviously, people said that from the very beginning, that that's important to establish for children. You've already done that with lots of those routines.
One thing I want to highlight too about that safety issue, that it
Mhm.
isn't just like the environment. It isn't just
Mhm.
like a physical safety, like
Mhm.
it's also like a cultural safety. Like
Mhm.
like if you speak another language,
Mhm.
needs to be safe, like a psychological safety.
Mhm.
Like children need to feel welcomed. Again, I think the word belonging came up a lot of times. So
Mhm.
just when you think of safety, it isn't just like the space, the physical space itself, but
Mhm.
safety in the sense that, oh, I am belonging here. Again,
Mhm.
the emotional and implicit messages we highlighted.
We will be respectful. And what does that mean? That means that we take care of the things in our classroom. So the first one was we take care of each other, take care of the things in our classroom. That might look like putting away things, neatly back on the shelf, telling the teacher when something is broken, trying to fix things, playing with things gently enough so that they don't get broken, etc. And then finally, we will be learners. And again, that's sort of our purpose here in our classroom. We will be learners, and that means it's okay to ask questions. And yes, it's okay to make mistakes. So we're going to talk a little bit now about some problem solving routines or things to kind of introduce that kind of go along with those agreements. And again, this is why it kind of takes like a week to go over them. Hold on, first one. Okay, so again, the idea that you have conflicts in a classroom. You have to, teaching kids a simple problem solving routine or protocol. Say it out. How do you feel about this? What's going on? Again, allowing for validating feelings. I feel really mad at you. I'm so angry at you right now. Talk it out. What can you do about it? And we're going to talk about how to use that in conjunction with this toolbox here on the right. Work it out. And then also after you work it out, really evaluate how did it go? Because again, part of the building the strategy of being a problem solver is evaluating the solutions that you came up with. So there's lots of simple problem solving routines like this, but I would keep it basically to 3 steps, especially for young children to kind of work through. A couple of other things that I think are important. This takes a while for kids to learn how to do, to talk it out, to work it out,
Practice.
and to practice. I think it is really difficult for kids to do it in the moment. So the space between the say it out and how do you feel and talk it out sometimes is a bit of time, because it's again, thinking about when you're in the middle of like a frustrating moment, your brain is really flooded with cortisol. So then someone trying to talk to you about like, well, what could you do next time? Or how do you like, blah, 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 it like overwhelms you, right?
What's important about the cortisol is that if you do have a lot of cortisol in your body, I don't know if we highlighted this earlier, but it shuts down access to your prefrontal cortex. And that's where like executive functioning and high order thinking live. So if you want them to be able to, manage and cope and deal with the expectations and things that you're doing in the classroom, you really have to give them the space to kind of get that cortisol level down, or help give them some strategies to help that cortisol level down.
Yeah, and I think a method that's really helpful is you can just, again, validate the feelings that they're having. You can just, sometimes it's called sports casting. You're really angry right now. You're so angry. You're crying so hard. Your face is really red. You're telling them what you're seeing. You're not saying it's going to be okay or anything like that. But I see that you're really upset.
I mean, I would suggest, right? Because you kind of said this earlier, like it seems like you're angry, right? Because sometimes
that's true.
As if you're not the individual, it's hard to articulate how they're feeling, but you can talk about maybe what you're noticing about how they're feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, or like describing, you're squeezing your hand so hard right now, so that the onus isn't on them to describe how they're feeling. Even again, how do you feel? They might not know what the words are. So toolbox. This is an idea, again, I'm sure you could buy one of these at Lakeshore, but the thing that's sort of different about the Set Up for Success one is that the solutions that are put in the toolbox really are generated from the children, right? So it's empty, or not too many in the beginning of the year. And you kind of introduce it to kids as, you know what, sometimes when we have problems in the classroom, we need to fix it. And what is, if you have something that's broken in your home, what could you use? And, kids will often say tools. Okay, good. We need to have some tools for our classroom problems when we need to fix things too. So I might introduce it. I mean, mine was a toolbox, those little red things. And inside this toolbox, I just had two. One was it was a help button from like Staples, come get me. And the other one was share, because it felt like many children knew what that was. Here's another tool that was really helpful in an early childhood classroom, was the tattle phone. Again, what little friend or friends don't go through a little bout of tattling in our classroom? And again, it makes a lot of sense because, again, we just talked about before about the agreements and, it's kind of keeping care and being respectful of each other. So a tattler really is trying to keep that intact, right? I mean, we all know, but what is typically done with kids who tattle, we say like, mind your own business, or I'll take care of that. And again, the message that gives to the child is like, wait, I thought we were all kind of accountable to each other.
That's true.
So the tattle phone was this way that kids could say what they needed to say. And so again, this is how one teacher used it. Leave a message here if you have a problem or issue with one of your classmates. We'll listen to them at the end of the day and get back to you. Again, so obviously they're in the modern world because they have a push button phone. I used to have a rotary phone there on my desk. You can probably get one of those from like eBay or like a garage sale. One of the reasons why I like a rotary phone was because, so again, always teaching, thinking about, they had to dial the number. So, you had to physically put your finger in that hole, the 9 to the 9, and then dial it around. So I could tell who could understand numbers. But the tattle phone number was something like 78990. So the physical act of having to wait for that dial to come all the way back gave them whatever the 2 minutes they needed to calm down. This teacher, he was really great. He would actually sew them little blankets so that they knew where to lay down for nap time. And also, like, this was his safe space. So again, thinking about places that aren't necessarily time out, but like as a place for you, and the kids would get to choose where their safe space was. So sometimes a safe space was an active space, or a really quiet, like under my desk was a place where a lot of kids would be like, that's where my safe space was. And so they would put up their name and their place, and with little ID, I think you can kind of see there are different things that they can be doing in that safe space, reading a book, popping bubble wrap, tearing paper, just something like that, that can get them back into regulation. You can use it to show them where, like if they have lineup spaces. Organizationally, again, we do small groups in focus on pre-K. So again, instead of being like here, and here, where everyone's going to go, the teacher would just hang up the sign. So the circle group, these are the friends that are going to come join me over at the red circle table. All they would need to do is take a look at that chart and know where they were going to be going when they came in from recess. I also used it as a way for them to save their work. I made like a bigger one, or like these little index cards like this, and then we call them their save names. So for example, if they were in the middle of centers and it was time to go to art, so instead of having a whole big cleanup thing, I'd say, okay, go put your save names on what you were doing, line up for art, and they go, and then they come back, and they knew exactly where to pick up where they were when they came back in the classroom by just going and finding their save name. A couple of alternatives to timeouts, and particularly apologies. Well, again, I'm sure many of you know or experience that, for young children, sometimes they might not, I think it's totally valid to not be sorry they did something, or not even necessarily connect what is it they're supposed to be sorry for. So instead, we encourage a process called Are You Okay? So one kid hits another kid with a block. So instead of telling you're sorry, you say, are you okay? And that feels a lot less threatening than like, so are you okay? And then the person who's been hurt has the option to say yes or no, right? They might be okay. They just might need to like shout out, oh my gosh, you hit me with a block. So if they say they aren't okay, then the next thing that they say is, what can I do for you? And the child can either say, don't do it again. Or sometimes, I mean, it really is pretty adorable. They do, or very, I don't want to say it's surprising, but again, their altruism is very, very heartwarming. Sometimes they'll say, I just want you to give me a hug, or can we play together nicely, or something like that, you know, or they might say ice and go give me some ice. And the other child will go get like a wet cloth or whatever it is that they have said, what can I do for you? And what that really does is that not only helps, that immediately changes a child who has been a harmer into being helpful, right? So an apology, again, implies consequence or blame, whereas are you okay immediately shifts that child to be somebody who did possibly make a mistake, but they're also able to, you know, offer, restore the relationship that might have been harmed. So that actually brings us to problem stories, which is part of the curriculum, but it's also something you can start using in the first 3 weeks of school. So remember when we were talking about creating all of the different tools for our toolbox, we were talking about how sometimes it's not helpful for kids to solve a problem in the middle of a problem. They're too emotional. So problem stories is a way to help children develop that capacity in a way that's not in the middle of a crisis. This is different because this is using the problems from the classroom. So what this is you create these block people. So if you see here over here on the right, they are pictures of kids or adults that the children interact with that are, this is what's kind of important, is facsimiles of the children in the classroom and yourself or the other adults. So for example, Joe in the classroom, he's 4 years old. He has a little brother. He's learning how to tie his shoes and he has red hair. So you create a block person named Mo, who has a little sister. He already knows how to tie his shoes, but he's learning how to ride a bike. Their teacher's name, I would be Miss Gedstead. The block teacher person might be Miss Medstead. So it's close enough to their reality, but it isn't actually them, right? So again, you want to avoid sort of being like having situations where it's scapegoating or anything, like something that's too close to them, because what it is you need them to do is to be able to sort of be a little bit dispassionate and removed from a kind of like a conflict situation. So the problem that you come up with is you act out a problem that might be happening in the classroom. You might do this, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week, every day if you need it, and you act out a story. Mo and Maisie, instead of Joe and Daisy, are having this problem in the block area. They're fighting over this red truck. You know, you act out a problem and everything like this, and you'd be like, oh my, I'm going to stop the story now. Friends, what's the problem? And then the children talk about what the problem is. And what's interesting about that, when you phrase it that way, what is the problem? You'll really see a wide range of what kids see as the problem. Well, the problem is you only have one blue truck. You know, or like Maisie's always mad at Joe or something like this. But you accept all of these ideas. Yeah, all of that does seem to be a problem. I wonder what they could do. Could you maybe give them some ideas of how to solve their problem? And again, kids will come up with lots of different problems, solutions. You validate every single one of them. That sounds like a good idea. Let's try that one out. Okay. Tobin here says that the solution should be to take the truck away or to bring a second truck in. Okay, let's act that out. Oh, that seemed to solve the problem. Great. Another child, let's try out Anthony's solution. Try that out. Those all seem to work. And then that's just it. There isn't a value placed on, well, that solution was better than that solution. Seems like all these solutions seem to work. That's the end of the problem story, friends. Thanks for your ideas. Keep thinking about it. And if you have a problem like this in your class, in the classroom, maybe you can use one of these solutions. So from this sort of simple play or this problem story, you should add a tool to the box, something like the Honey Voice. And they will be familiar with a lot of these solutions because they came up with it. Because believe me, the next day or like an hour from now, someone will be fighting over that same red truck. This reminds me, friends, of the problem that Mo and Maisie had in the problem story. Do you remember what solutions we thought of? Or again, like Anthony said, let's take a look at the chart where you had some great ideas.
I mean, you could, once you kind of normalize it, it will be a tool,
yeah.
in the toolbox. Ms. Ford is asking, where do you get the block people? These are just like printed out pictures from Google, I believe, and then you just tape them to the blocks. And then these characters, you kind of build them up, right? Like it might start with one problem story, but Mo, not Joe, right? Mo's gonna be a class member in your classroom, right? Like you start in the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year, everyone's gonna know who's Mo, who Mo is, right? They're gonna know like his, characteristics and things like that. They're not just kind of like arbitrary things, you know what I mean? Like they're actual characters, if that makes sense.
I think one way to do it too is to do it again slowly. So you're not introducing, if you have 20 kids in your class, you're not introducing 20 block children, right? It's sort of, you want them to identify with these children, kind of, I was going to kind of say kind of like in Sesame Street, you get to know them. And so you might introduce them just like the way kids would meet kids. Okay, friends, I'm going to introduce you to a new block friend today. This is Maisie, and tell a little bit about her. She's going to come over here and meet Joe. Oh, let's see how they get along together. Oh, Joe says this. And if there's a problem with the way he says hello to her, hey, friends, do you see a problem here? He's hurting Maisie's feelings. They really do become part of the community. So again, you may want to keep the block people, I don't want to say particularly separate, but I would put them sort of not necessarily part of the block area, but maybe, next to the toolbox where kids could act out the stories themselves.
I had like a shoebox with them in it.
Because again, like let's put them to bed or let's send them off to their homes or things like that. And another reason why, versus linking in a booklet with it. But one of the other reasons why this is particularly helpful as a way for kids to solve the problem is because, again, they have enough of removal. That's not exactly them, but it's close enough to their reality that they can problem solve with neutrality and not with a ton of like cortisol driven emotion. And then the other piece too, why we use these images of people rather than puppets or cartoons is because there actually is some research that when kids sort of see things in cartoon form or with puppets, they don't make the association with people problems. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
absolutely.
Yeah. So they are more relatable. So it is like, again, I'm not literally dogging another program, but they have the impulsive puppy in Second Step. Well, they totally sort of see them as like, there's that darn puppy again. Of course he's like that. That's the way puppies are. And so for them to connect, hey, I am a 4-year-old, I'm like a puppy. That's a little bit more difficult for them to do.